if I leave this sheet of paper here on my lap, is that?
I'll make it so it's not possible.
Okay.
Is null, and that's really Nigel's great thing of nihilism, or
Good evening and welcome to CS LitCrit, a monthly panel discussion about computer science researchers and the impact they have on English literature, if any. I am your host, Mike Zastry. Tonight's program focuses on Nigel H, a leading compiler constructionist and professor in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Victoria, Canada. His literary output spans more than 30 years of research papers, books, reviews, internal memos, and poetry slams. Joining me to discuss his work are three experts: Jonathan Mason, an independent analyst based in Portland.
Hello, Michael.
Rhodes Brown, visiting professor of repetitive dialogues at Reykjavik University, Iceland.
Good evening.
And John Aycock, professor and chair of Horspoolian literature at the University of Lefbach-on-the-Sea in Austria.
Good day.
And we do apologize to our viewers for the quality of the video from Austria. Our technicians are currently working on the problem. Let's begin with John Aycock. You have spent much of your career in a close study of his work. How do you explain the origins, the wellsprings, if you will, of his written work?
Well, for Nigel, I really think it all started with practical fast searching in strings. And you could even say that Nigel was an early string theorist. But if you look through his work, a theme really develops. I mean, there's fast, easy arithmetic, fast searching in strings, faster early parser, faster generalized LR parsing. If I had to say something to Nigel, it would be, slow down and smell the academic roses. After then, of course, he got into a bit of trouble in 2001 with exploiting exceptions. Sweatshops, very nasty business with exception exploitation. But he's back on track now with his work on objects, or as he likes to put it, OO, not uh-oh.
You alluded to his influential 1980 paper on string searching. Here's a short quote from the paper. If the algorithm returns 0, then PAT does not occur inside string. Otherwise, the result is the position of its first occurrence. With the IBM 360-370 TRT instruction, we would have to code a short loop. The comparison of two strings in a loop termination condition can be performed with a single instruction on all the machines mentioned. Did his choice to use IBM instructions constrain or enrich his prose style?
I think the key there is returning 0. 0, or as we like to call it, nil. That's really Nigel's embracement of nihilism, or as I like to think of it, Nigelism.
Rhodes Brown, you have published several studies on Horspool's middle period, which was a time in the mid-1990s when he published work like Translating Prologue to C, a WAM-based approach. Some scholars claim this leaping from paradigm to paradigm was a bit of a stretch for him, with all those subjunctives and drop verbs. Would you agree with these critics?
Well, perhaps, but I think this is an important transition as he moves to a more direct form of expression that he's prone to using these days. Although I found that a lot of the logic of some of his arguments had been broken down into far too simple statements, and they became very imprecise over the course of the work.
Rhodes, you are also a world expert on repetition and redundancy and have published two seminal texts in these areas. When you read Horspool's works on partial redundancy elimination, do you consider that foray into this particular genre to be a positive development?
No. He seems to continually revisit the same topic again and again and again. And with this particular venture, I'm not sure why he seems to be speculating on information that hasn't even happened yet. So, no, he seems to only have a real partial grasp of the topic.
Jonathan Mason, you were present when Horspool began to experiment with some of the artistic ideas made popular by the object-oriented community. I understand you also have seen his fluency of style and expression increase as he has embraced some of these new ideas. Can you talk about some of those early days?
Yes, the beauty and elegance of objects. Design patterns and all these wonderful things. So much eloquence in his prose. Unfortunately, for the first 3 months, he referred to the language as C octothorpe. It took us some time to convince him that it is, in fact, C sharp.
It must have been a strange and stressful time for you all.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was, quite.
You've examined his 2005 work on integrating Java, C Sharp, XML, and SOAP. Some have remarked this combination to be unholy, almost unnatural.
Oh, I wouldn't say it's unholy. I mean, that's going a little far. He was drawing on his earlier experience with Java and XML. The Java crowd really likes their XML, and the C Sharp crowd is not quite as strongly embracing it, so Nigel used his roots to bring some of our XML expertise to the C Sharp community.
John Aycock, in preparation for today, I spent time reading Recursive Ascent-Descent Parsing, which you've noted is strongly influenced by James Joyce's Ulysses. I must admit to struggling with the work and haven't yet managed to reach the end. How have you approached this work?
I was particularly taken by recursive ascent. For my own ascent, I chose to use the west face, but then I ran into problems, needed to retreat before I could continue my journey.
You have also collaborated with him on several works, including Schrödinger's Token.
Well, I was around when that paper was written, and we were up to our knees in dead cats before the algorithm was perfected. Totally disgusting.
Yeah, this was a very disappointing time for Horspool. I actually can't believe that he was involved in a project like this. I mean, Aycock has absolutely no standards, and I mean, this was just ridiculous. I mean, even the title was overly cute, almost not in Horspool's best form.
Continuing with you, Rhodes, there is Horspool's paper on even faster generalized LR parsing, where he writes, hidden left recursion in grammars is known to present a problem for GLR parsers. This is because a grammar with hidden left recursion has an infinite number of ways to derive certain strings in the language it generates. Hidden left recursion may be detected at parser generation time. Is this the kind of writing that you alluded to earlier in the program, the struggle Horspool experienced when handling repetitive prose structures?
Oh yes, I think it's a perfect example of the same thing just over and over again. Clearly, this is an example of the phase in which Nigel's obsession with repetitiveness is venturing out from his subconscious into his writings. And clearly the first steps towards his redundancy phase.
What about his most recent writing, using patterns, his so-called pattern literature phase?
Yes, I'm very impressed with this work. I think it's a late entry into the structured programming debate, and a very timely move at that, considering that most of the luminaries are either dead or senile. I mean, he's really used his age to his advantage here, and his position is going to go unchallenged.
Jonathan, any response from you?
Well, I think he's done fine work bringing the design patterns and structure debate to a new generation of C# programmers. It's a relatively new language. I think he has a great deal of useful input for new programmers in C#, and I think Rhodes' comments are a little out of line, quite frankly.
Nigel Horspool is also a prolific book writer, starting with his blockbuster 1986 memoir, C Programming in the Berkeley Unix Environment, a moving story of his struggles as a programmer in the petrochemical industry. His 1993 sequel won wide acclaim across the book publishing world, and his very latest effort, C# Concisely, has caused a generation of writers to rethink the way they integrate magical realism in their software. We have here an exclusive clip of Nigel Horspool reading from C# Concisely. Let's watch.
Section 4.7, Case Study 2, the Rock, Paper, Scissors game. Introduction to the game. The game of rock, paper, scissors is normally played by two people, and there are many rounds. For each round, both players put one hand behind their backs. Then on the count of three, both players bring out their hands very quickly. If a hand is brought out as a closed fist, that represents rock. If it is brought out with an open palm and all fingers together, that represents paper. Finally, if it is brought out with forefinger and index fingers making a V shape, then that represents scissors. If the two players bring out their hands making the same shape, the round is drawn. Otherwise, scissors beats paper, because a pair of scissors can cut paper. Paper beats rock, because a sheet of paper can be wrapped around a rock. And rock beats scissors, because hitting the scissors with a rock would damage the scissors.
Rhodes Brown, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a perfect example of Horspool's ability to go into mind-numbing repetitiveness. I think it's a little simplistic, but yet a wonderful example of his ability to make even the most mundane things completely
All right, now I'd
obscure.
like to point out that this book is, one of the primary audiences of this book was new programmers, younger audience. So I think the fact that it was simplistic was somewhat intentional so that the new programmers can understand it. It's pointing to a younger audience, and I think it's quite clear that we all understood what he was saying.
Thank you, Jonathan. John Aycock, what was your reaction to the excerpt?
Quite frankly, it didn't do much for me. However, the rock, paper, scissors aspect I found highly symbolic and one might even say Freudian in nature.
Well, we are about out of time, gentlemen. This has been a fascinating discussion. Last words to you all. Rhodes?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more of the same from Horspool.
How about you, Jonathan?
I think Nigel still has a great deal to offer. I just hope that Microsoft refrains from using any obscurely named symbols in their new language names.
And the last word to you, John.
I know Nigel's going to be around for a while. He's really only mastered partial redundancy through his research so far. Once he's fully redundant, then he can retire.
Hello? Hello? We seem to have lost our signal with Austria. Okay. Well, thanks to you all, Rhodes Brown, Jonathan Mason, and John Aycock.